everyone, welcome to a quick little intro to this video. This video was recorded back in January to coincide with the 10th anniversary release of the Moonbase DVD, but we thought we'd release it when the Celestial Toymaker comes out on Blu-ray, which is Monday the 10th of June. So we thought we'd celebrate 10 years of the Moonbase and 10 years since the best Doctor Who missing episode animation. So let us talk about why it is our favourite animation in the missing episode range.
On the 20th of January 2014, Doctor Who fans were treated to a DVD release of The Moonbase, the classic Patrick Troughton story where he first encountered the Cybermen. However, half of it is currently missing from the BBC archives, and so Planet 55 Studios were hired to animate episodes 1 and 3. And it might just be the most gorgeous animation Doctor Who has ever had.
I have to agree. It is the best animation.
I love it.
Stick your evil of the Daleks where the sun don't shine. This is where it's at.
Celebrating this wonderful little release, really, and a rather wonderful story too. I think
Yeah.
the basis.
This was, I believe, sort of one of the last classic DVDs, really.
Yeah, it was sort of like the end of the line for the range, wasn't it? And the range certainly went out with quite a few Troughtons, because you had this Enemy of the World, Web of Fear, and then, just over a year later, the Underwater Menace, the infamous telesnap reconstruction.
Yeah.
That was, there was a trailer on this Moonbase release, wasn't there? Because it was originally also going to be animated by Planet 55 Studios, which is why during part 1 you see at least Ben and Polly in their Underwater Menace garb. I don't know if you see the Doctor and Jamie as well at all, but you've got Polly all in the shells and stuff. And the reason that they had those animation models is because they were sort of preparing to do Underwater Menace. I don't know how far they got with it, but then I believe the production company sadly went into liquidation. And so that DVD release was inevitably postponed, presumed cancelled for quite a while, and then finally sort of rushed out with a rather naff. You can't even call it a telesnap reconstruction, really. It's a slideshow.
Yeah, it's a glorified PowerPoint thing.
Which is no fault of the team behind it, because they very much offered to do the full thing, but the higher ups said no, just this little this will do, and yeah, that's what we were left with. Although now we have an animation.
Yes, we do.
We've also got a better reconstruction on that animation, at least. So we'll talk about Underwater Menace someday. We'll get around to that.
But let's talk about this.
Let's be positive. Yes,
this forgotten gem, because I feel like the Moonbase is a forgotten story, because when people think of the Cybermen, they go 10th Planet, Tomb of the Cybermen. They forget that bit in between, and even the Moonbase Cyberman design, it's referred to as the Tomb design.
Yeah.
I know there's a little difference with the piping, but it's essentially the Moonbase Cybermen.
Oh, definitely. But yeah, as you say, they're always seen as the Tomb Cybermen. I suppose partially because that's the complete story, isn't it?
Yeah.
But also it's more iconic for many reasons. Meanwhile, Moonbase is perhaps a remake of the 10th Planet. But I'd argue it's more refined. It's the stronger of the two.
I think the Cybermen work way better. I think there's more iconic imagery, especially when you get to sort of part 3 with the Cybermen and start a part 4 with them.
The poly cocktails on them marching on the moon. Yeah, that's brilliant imagery.
And that's quite haunting,
Yeah, certainly the deaths as well via poly cocktails. Like the way they're animated is very well done. The hand like writhing in the dust of the moon.
Yeah.
I love how authentic this animation style feels to what could have been on screen.
I think it's the most authentic, I would say.
It certainly has a couple of flares to it. Like you've got the shot of the monitor in the TARDIS, and it sort of zooms into that, and then you see the TARDIS itself land. Like little visual flares, but it's never anything like what you have from, say, Macra Terror, where the Macra are definitely very different there than they were originally.
The thing I like is when one of the workers are going to check the stock room, and you just get the silhouette of the Cybermen, then it's Ben, and then how the Cybermen zaps said.
Yeah, was there all along
in the shadow.
Yeah, Ralph, isn't it? Number 14.
Ralph, yeah. That's a nice sort of artistic flair, but it's still very Morris Barry.
It's something these early animations, when they were just black and white, were able to do very well, is the use of shadows.
Yeah.
I mean, that's certainly true here and the Invasion, I feel. But, I mean, one of the strengths of this one is the amount of rotoscoping that it uses, which is, when they film usually one of the animation crew doing these actions themselves, and then they draw over said member of the crew in the style so that they get a more authentic, movement to the characters. So they used it again with, I know, the ball scene in the Faceless Ones, where Troughton, says, "I've got a bomb," in the airport, and throws the ball instead. Yeah, that was using rotoscoping, but certainly I think they've used it much more here to great effect.
I think they've really captured Troughton's physicality, and I think that's been missing on some animations. I think here
there's a stiffness to some of the later ones. And I mean, oftentimes characters are quite still in shots here.
Yeah.
But there's like a flare to the eyes or something. They look alive in many respects.
I think they've took the notes from their previous releases, like Reign of Terror, way too much going on. And then you get, 10th Planet, which is still very good. When you get here, everything's been refined, and I think it is the best work.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is it? Practice makes for perfect, and you just wonder what they could have done with the Underwater Menace had they, made it to the end of that production, because certainly the step-ups in quality from, certainly from the Reign of Terror to the 10th Planet and this is huge, so... yeah, more of this animation style would have been lovely. You could see where there's corners cut, but it doesn't bother you, or at least it doesn't bother me. Like, you've got that same loop of the commander of the base, Hobson, like walking from like left to right and round to the front of the screen. It's fine. Like, it doesn't necessarily jump out to me as, oh, they're just using that to save some money. And ultimately, these are done on quite a cheap budget anyway, so it's amazing that it looks as good as it does.
And it's weird to be watching sort of a surviving episode and look forward to the animation.
It doesn't feel like it's just a chore to get through that's filling in the gap.
No. It's one way you're like, oh, that was really well done. That's great. Yeah, it's one what it's a pleasure to sit down and watch and not check your phone.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, sometimes the animation is more enjoyable than the surviving episodes in some ways, because it is so artistically done. It's such an impressive feat how alive it all feels.
Like the Cybermen leaving the spaceship and just getting the sunlight on the map. Oh, so
the light on top, like shining. Yeah,
and it sort of fade when Polly's cocktail, and just sort of it flickers out as it dies. Beautiful.
I mean, the hands in this as well. Again, I think a lot of the handwork would have been rotoscoped on, but that just makes them feel so much more alive. It doesn't feel like awkward animated hands doing these things. It feels like real person's hands are, doing all these actions. You have quite a few like close-up shots and mid shots, whereas I think a lot of the later animations suffer from too many long shots especially when it's in the 16:9 aspect ratio and it's just the characters sort of stood in a line talking to each other. It can get a bit dull, whereas here it keeps it fairly dynamic. And again, it's true to Maurice Barry's original direction style.
Glorious thing. Great artwork by Lee Binding.
Oh, the original cover.
Yeah, I love the cover for it.
Yeah, that's rather nice one, isn't it? I love the spacesuits that they got going on here. I mean, not the most comfortable for the actors to wear during the production, but it's nice having something that's a bit more futuristic than your typical spacesuit.
Yeah, the sort of goldfish bowl helmet. Yeah, it's very sort of Terminus in a way.
Yeah, I mean, we love our Sanctuary Base 6 spacesuit, but there's something nice about it. It's very a 60s, isn't it?
Yeah,
of
with
the
like
era.
the plastic squeezy bottle on the back of the suits for oxygen. It's great. There's a charm to it.
And it also feels like something that the Doctor would easily store away in the chest in the TARDIS.
Yes. Speaking of Doctor, I would say this is a story where Troughton becomes the Doctor.
Yes, it is. Because certainly it's his fourth story. We've gone from Power of the Daleks, where it's mostly quite a serious story, but Troughton's still very much settling into the role, isn't he? And I mean, he's the first actor to play the role who isn't William Hartnell. This is the first time someone's got to do the role differently, but there's no precedent for that as such. There's no precedent for the idea of finding his own character. Although he's sort of got to, because he is so different from William Hartnell.
Yeah.
And so there's sort of a exploration of how to do that. And then through the Highlanders and the Underwater Menace, there's a bit more sending it up, isn't there?
Yeah, more dress up.
Yeah, that as well. Whereas here, it's the mission statement. It's the first proper base under siege of his era, which becomes what a lot of his era, particularly season 5, is made up of. It's, his bread and butter, really. And with that, there's a more serious tone brought to it to sell the threat of the monsters, which is sort of what his era is most famous for, the monsters, I would say.
Yeah, he is one of those Doctors that the monsters are very memorable to, especially season 5,
Yeah, that is the monster season, really. And this is definitely laying the groundwork for the format that would thrive in season 5. And you've also got that mission statement from the Doctor of there are some corners of the universe which has bred the most terrible things. They must be fought. That's very much what the Doctor is all about in this incarnation, fighting the monsters. And I think a lot of the serious tone lended to this story comes from the fact that it's directed by Maurice Barry, a rather no-nonsense director who very much pushed Patrick Troughton to do less comedy, really. He was brought in there to, I suppose, straighten him out, almost like a military discipline. Yeah. Make a soldier of him in a way.
But you still get the comedy there when he's taking samples. That's all well and good, but there's an edge there which I like.
Yeah, there's it's going into the clownish area, but at the same time he's the one in control, isn't he? This is the point where with the first Doctor, he's in control. He wants everyone to know he's in control. With the second Doctor, he's in control, but he doesn't want anything to know it. He's playing the fool to catch them off guard. And you've got that wonderful little moment of physical comedy where he walks out of the lab and Hobson and the gang are all sat there waiting for him, and he does that little arms up gesture that he does and tries to walk back away, but Hobson's already seen him by that point, so it's too late. You get wonderful little moments like that throughout. And I mean, speaking of Hobson as well, Patrick Barr gives a very impressive performance that I think also lends to Patrick Troughton's taking the character more seriously, I suppose, because he's up against a no-nonsense actor there, so he's raising his game to match that. And so there's no animosity there, actor-wise. but there's like, I suppose, a mutual respect that comes across.
Yeah, you definitely get that character-wise. Of both sort of scientists, and that's what I like about this story is that it's not like, who are you, why are you here? It's very accepting the characters. It kind of there's a nice sort of shorthand there with this story.
Yeah, I mean, you do get the moment of, right, you're getting thrown out the base if you don't come up with something, but yeah,
it doesn't seem genuine.
It doesn't. Yeah, it's not dragged on, and he's not like you had in the 10th Planet with Cutler, where he's antagonistic throughout, and in some ways ends up being a more primary antagonist than the Cybermen. Here, Hobson has his moments, but they're sort of end up in the same boat about halfway through, don't they? And work together to defeat the Cybermen with gravity, or Mavity.
Yeah, is it
because that's the Cybermen's weakness?
Mavitron now.
Yeah, perhaps. But yeah, I mean, is it that the Cybermen were repelled by the gravitational force, or is it just that their weakness is gravity, so they couldn't stand it and flew off? That's what that interesting scene where the Doctor is talking to himself, wondering what the Cybermen are afraid of. He's like, "Ooh, gravity. There's a fault." There's some bizarre bits of scientific knowledge going on in Kit Pedler's script when you think he's a scientist, but he's coming out with things like, the energy of Earth being sucked by Mondas and such. You think, where have you come up with this from? But at the end of the day, it's sci-fi. It's all. Is it even sci-fi? Is it space fantasy? It's just a bit of fun.
It's one of my favourite Charlton stories. I'll happily say that.
Yeah, I'll happily say that. It's one I can easily stick on so many times. I definitely did that 2014 time. Whenever I was going on holiday back then, I'd always pack a few Doctor Who DVDs with me to keep me going.
Yeah.
Moonbase was always one I would turn to for that. It was a story I loved then and still do now. Must have watched over 50 times in the last 10 years since its release.
Easily.
I mean, let us all know what you think of the Moonbase, and especially that animation style. Are we wrong? Is there a superior animation style out there? We'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
We're not.
We're not wrong, but
no.
I mean, the only wrong opinion I'll accept is the invasion.
Yeah, the invasion's beautiful too.
That's another strong one. But yeah, I mean, let us know below. Were you there when this DVD came out? I mean, I'm pretty sure I would have picked it up day one. I think this was go straight to the shops and pick it off the shelf for me. How about you?
Yeah, I got mine. I think the weekend of its release in Asda.
Oh.
So I think I might have been a little bit later.
Yeah. Where were you January 20th or thereabouts, 2014? Yeah. Were you picking this one up? Or have you become a fan later, or just got into Classic Who later, got into collecting? Whatever the case, let us know your journey to discovering the Moonbase. If you have discovered the Moonbase, I mean, if you've not, it's on iPlayer, the animation as well.
It's worth checking out.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.